Wow, this does feel very pandemic-y. This is does feel
Episode 4 trillion.
this well, it feels like episode 4, like original. Like
It
like
does actually.
this is nostalgia episode. But this is season 2, episode 4.
Season 2, episode 4. We're in June on episode 4. I'm just
Yes.
pointing that out.
That's like we're on a good roll. But this is the vintage episode, and since we'll be recording this on audio and not video, what Kirk and I will tell you is that we are on Zoom and not in person, and we started this podcast on Zoom and not in person because of the pandemic, and so it feels again kind of like we're going back to the beginning, even though it's not been that long, but still it feels like we're going back to the beginning. Season 2, I mean, we've made some groundwork. Like we've laid we you know we're in season 2. I don't care how many episodes we're in. We're in season 2.
Yeah. Although
So
our listener might be disappointed
that
by
we've
the
gone
gap
that
in
that
between episodes in season 2.
it's been a light season 2. It's but we're still.
It's just a long cliffhanger between episodes.
Well, I mean, I guess technically, if this is episode 5, because there's a lost episode never to be found. Uh,
Never to have been recorded.
Never, yeah, it's not. So it's not the lost episode that will soon like maybe be found at some point. Like when Miles Davis just had a recording, like he's been dead a long time, but they just found some recordings like 2 months ago, so they released them. That will never happen with us because we actually never recorded anything, even though we did a whole podcast
I mean, they're on the security cam probably, but
somewhere. Or
and plus Siri was listening.
Siri was listening. Tim Cook's he's got it somewhere. We could ask him.
They'll dig it up from the archives.
Yeah, can you pull this from Apple Archive, please? So I am actually interested. I mean, I'm always interested in this, but I'm quite interested in this because this was a hard passage for me. Not in the mutual submission, but you get into the household and stuff. So this is Ephesians 5, verses 15 to 33, and then into chapter 6, 1 through 9. So this is about the idea of giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And that was the idea, is what does it look like for us to live lives of mutual submission before others out of reverence for Christ. So that's where we begin. Episode 4. Where we end, who knows? That's the beauty of this thing.
But the submission,
Yeah.
people have a really hard time with that,
Yes.
I think, because of our own pride, right? We're very proud that we are awesome, right? We are just awesome. So why isn't everyone submitting to us? Turns
That's
out
great.
we are just as awesome as the person next to us,
Yeah.
and not more. That's it.
Do you think the
So
assumption is that, like, that's such a great point? Do you think the assumption is just that, like, we don't like submission because your point,
because
we are
it
so awesome.
imagines that, yeah, we lessen ourselves, right? That's the prideful response to
Yeah.
being asked to submit, is that why should I,
Yeah.
right? Why
Why
should
aren't you
I,
to me?
right? Yeah, exactly. Because I've got all of life figured out. I want to meet that guy who can say that and mean it, because I've never met that person, but everyone feels like that's real. um, I don't know. For me, I, sorry, but I get to relate this personally to being in martial arts. Um, there's a, not a requirement, right? It's um, a moment where you note your own level of skill versus people around you, right?
Hmm.
And someone's just better at this than you are. right? And they have skills that are more effective or more efficient or more smooth or something, right? There's something to be learned from everybody.
Hmm.
And it becomes humbling to the point where you are respectful of that other person, um, and humble toward that other person in eagerness to grow by learning from them. Um, and I look at this passage through that lens,
Hmm.
and you walk into a congregation in a church, everybody's there from every walk of life.
Hmm.
Everyone's going through stuff, and it's that walk a mile in the other person's shoes kind of a thing, right? I'm I don't walk a mile in Jay's shoes, or a mile in Bonnie's shoes every day. Like that, their lives are amazing, right?
Yeah.
People that are there in the that show up every week, they have things going on that they're working through that they're good at too, right? That they're
Hmm.
great at. Um, and so having things that other people have, uh, that they should be respected for who they are, and we should feel humbled around each other, and that humble feeling should uh, lead toward that sense of brotherly love,
Hmm.
where you are so thankful to be with whoever, that what an honor. And so there's that kind of level of respect, I think, in that submission.
Wh-
There has to be respect in submission.
There has to be, well, high trust, high respect to submit
Yeah.
to submit. Otherwise, I don't think it works. But so here's the question. I have two questions. I'll ask the one, and then we'll see if we get to the other. What do you think? Where do you think the starting point is? Do you think it's high? Like one of the passages I use, and I don't have the address on me now, but Paul says, "Outdo one another in showing
Yeah.
honor." Uh, so on one hand, you have that idea of high respect for one another, but then the other part, you have there's you can have high respect for someone, but still not submit to them, or still not live submitted before them. But there's a humility, like, so you use those two words, the honor and humility. What comes first? Showing respect and honor for someone, and then you're like, okay, I because of my respect for you, I'm submitting myself to you, or is it I'm I'm choosing to humble myself, place myself in a humble position, so that I can learn to submit to others. Not to, and again, I made strong caveats to good parentheses around
Right.
this, and I'll make them again, just for clarity's sake, not for you, but just for clarity's sake. Just that, submission does not mean generally like people walking over you. Submission out of fear. If you're forcing someone to or trying to manipulate someone to submit, that's abuse. So that, like, there's all these caveats to submission. um, but if you're choosing to submit to another person, opening yourself up for influence, what do you think comes first? Like, what's the chicken or the egg in this? Is it the honoring someone or the humbling itself?
That's an interesting question, because you're not going to just walk into any building immediately humbling yourself, right?
Yeah.
Any group immediately humbling yourself. I mean, maybe the first time you meet somebody, you're not really sure what's going on with a group, and some new group, right? You walk in and you're like, oh, let me just kind of hang back and see what's happening and what's the dynamic, right? So that's not, is that humbling? Maybe it's acting quieter, perhaps. Um, but that's interesting. Does humility come before the honor or the respect? I think the respect begets the humility,
Hmm.
because when you are, there has to be an openness and an awareness first of what are the other person's capacities, and what they are presenting or what they carry with them. You have to kind of feel it first in order to know that that's that person, like whoever is in front of you, with you, next to you, that person can do amazing things. That's humbling because it's not something you're doing,
Hmm.
or maybe it is something you're doing, but you're not doing as well, and you wish you could. So there's a that moment is humbling, um, and now you hold that person in a place of honor. I think in that sequence.
So what? That brings up an interesting point, a thought. So obviously, submission slash honor. We're kind of using a couple different words, but I think they both fit. Like I think you show honor um, because you see um, something that value, you see value in that person, um, but you can't do that. Like submission cannot happen outside a relationship. It can't. You don't, if you're isolating yourself, you don't submit because there's nothing to submit to. So that to me is obvious. What's less obvious,
Mm-hmm.
which I've not thought about, but what you said is humility. Like it seems like by what you're saying that you cannot be, or you cannot exhibit humility outside of relationship, because how would you show humility? How would you show
To no
humility if
one.
it wasn't within a relationship? What's that?
Right. Yeah, to no one. How would you show humility without anyone around?
Right. Yeah.
And then are you showing humility? Because that's no good, right? Like just for show, right?
No,
That would
that's
be
true.
not humility. That's self-deprecation, which is different, right? But humility is like more of a feeling of being awestruck by being in the presence of. I think so that you have taken yourself down a notch socially, I guess, to um, feel and show respect toward this other person,
Yeah, and
this
showing
other, yeah,
there's a deference, like to
right,
I'm giving. Well, and even like
like wow, they, yeah, yeah,
Jesus talks about just like when you show up at a party. And this is I'm gonna massacre this parable,
right,
but show up at a party, you never take the seat of honor, you take the lowest seat. So there's like in relationship, it's always there's a deference that you choose, but it happens. I don't know. I've just never thought about it like that. It's got to happen in relationship, and then but then the relationship between humility and honor have to interplay in order for there to be submission, right?
yes, yes, it would have to be. So if you are showing honor towards somebody, it's because you are holding that person higher than yourself, and therefore you have submitted to out of respect to, and that submission then and that humility that comes with it, I think, um, frees you to um, help in ways that you might not have if you were just walking around proud of who you are. Proud of who you are is not exactly what I mean, but filled with um, so much self-love that you see no value in others. So when you have lowered yourself as even here it mentions, right, to the level of servant, right? Jesus lowered
Mm,
himself to the level of
mm,
servant, and that's our example.
mm.
Oh my goodness, it's embarrassing that we aren't doing that.
It
If
isn't. Yeah.
I got, because we're not greater than him.
Right.
We couldn't possibly, right? Even the disciples who were with him um, recognized that they couldn't possibly equate to anything that he did. So it's that's humbling right there, right? That's like a gut punch
Yeah.
when you're like, oh wow, I totally needed to improve in my uh, my humbleness skills. But but careful what you wish for, because when you ask for that, you get it. That's one of those cosmic things that's just great. You say, God, I would really like to work on my humbleness. You will be granted so many opportunities to grow in that area in a
Are you
hurry.
sure? Are you sure? Do you know
Yeah,
what you just asked for?
that floodgate opens right away. That's not like I need $100. No, this is this is immediately boom. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Right away. There you go. First one. Or you trip over something. It takes nothing to knock us down a little bit, right? If we recognize that that's what that is. Otherwise, you become angry and you're going the opposite direction. Human beings are fickle.
Yeah. Yes. Totally agreed. It was so. Um, what then is okay? So if we're showing deference to each other, we're humble. We humble ourselves before each other, before one another, and we're submitting, which I defined as opening oneself up to being influenced by another. It doesn't mean that they have complete control over you. It just means that we're open to one another's influence. How like so I am not, I have to just even just inform my bias. I'm not, even though I'm in this role as pastor, I'm not a type A kind of guy, right? I'm not like I'm not super driven necessarily. Um so uh so like I talk about this stuff, and this is very interesting to me because I like the idea of humility and deference and raising other people up. I don't at all do it well or perfectly, but so what I'm thinking about is um like I could imagine someone coming and being like, well, how does anything ever happen? How does anything ever get done in a group of people if everyone's just showing deference to one another? You know what I mean? Like if it's just like, no, you we're like, have you ever been in a conversation where it's like we should go to eat at a restaurant? It's like, well, where do you want to go? Like go out to eat, and you're like,
Oh,
well, I don't know, where do you want to go to eat? I don't really care. Where do you want to go to eat? And no, you just
you
do.
yeah, and you start listing things. What would you like? And then you start trying to eliminate things. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
painful.
So right,
Yes,
right, and so like so that that is not the submission that I think the scripture talks about. However, I could see that being an assumption that's made, like, okay, well, everyone's just kind of like no one's doing anything. We're just showing deference to each other.
that's a difference, right? That's not submission per se. I think that's and not even deference. Now you're giving somebody else the opportunity to make the choice, and they just let that go zooming past them. And there was you threw him nice easy pitch, and it went past, and it wasn't even considered a foul or a strike. It was just keeps on going. This zoom into the stands, and no call, and that's bizarre and frustrating. But yeah, to make the weird baseball reference for no apparent reason,
Why not? I'm not going to make it.
that is it's a strange moment where you're like, hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And you're lost. Two people not guiding each other anywhere. Yeah.
And you would say
So
that's not. You would say that's not. You're saying that it's not. That is not submission.
that is not submission, I don't think. You that has taken submission to an extreme, perhaps.
Hmm.
But I think submission would be, I know you like, and fill in blank for dinner. Then I chose this restaurant for us so that you can enjoy a thing that maybe I don't like as much, but I know you love. Um, it's this new food truck that serves nothing but acorn squash, something like that. I don't know, but yeah. So, which I know is one of your favorites.
It's one of my favorites.
Both listeners, please send acorn squash to John.
That's all I've ever wanted in life is just buckets of acorn squash.
Oh, and again, careful what you wish for.
That's lining up with the prayers of humility.
That's number 2 after humility. That's
boom, acorn squash.
But
so
yeah,
that's a great distinction. I feel like where it's you're saying it's not just that we like lose, because the other thing too, it's kind of like, well, you lose all sense of your personality and self if you're just like, nah, I don't care what anyone, but it's not, it's you're still, there's still identity, there's still authority, there's still, I mean, personal authority, there's still influence, it's all there, but you're using all that. And I think this is what, the scriptures really point to is, even Philippians 2, um, where it says, I think that's where the outdoing on our part, but the idea of like using all of our resources to encourage and lift up others. So it's like, okay, I don't like acorn squash, but you do. So here's this great acorn squash menu restaurant. So I'm going to take my agency and use it to submit to you by giving you something that you like that I don't. Which really, honestly, that's a
Or,
great definition of love too.
well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be that I don't either, right? It could be
Right?
we
Yeah.
both like this thing. Here's this thing I will give you in honor of you also liking this thing, right? So you don't lose yourself
Right.
as part of
That's
this.
yeah.
You are encouraging others. You are as this moment of submission. You're assisting and elevating others who out of love and respect and because of a level of humility. You have to have it. You have to have it in order to have the openness and love to um, be willing to submit, I think.
Hmm. Yes. So there's really, I mean, there's, part of this too is I, it, and I think this comes into a cultural assumption about submission, that there's a real sense of just kind of and I think again, this goes into kind of what you said before, like, well, why aren't people submitting to me? That's what we're kind of aiming at. Um, but the call for generations has been like cultural repression, like I in order for us to live together culturally, I repress my sense of self, um, in order for us to agree culturally. Well, in the last 150 years, it's reversed. It's like I'm like, you're gonna have to put up with what I prefer, even if you hate it. That's the way things work. So submission has gone right out the window. This, to your point, like, it's just, there's no sense of submission, partially because to submit feels like, well, to submit assumes that you're losing self, when what you said is fantastic, that submitting is really about expressing love to another, expressing love in such a way, that it honors the other person. So there's really, you're still holding on to everything that you are. In fact, you're using everything that you are to honor somebody else. Um,
Right? Isn't that what Jesus did?
right. Yeah. And that's, yeah. And that's actually, that's a new thought. That's a new thought of submission I've not thought about, is that it's actually an expression of your identity, your personhood, instead of a letting go of, because again, when I think of,
Yeah.
and this might just be me, someone mentioned on Sunday that I was probably a little too, like, caveaty, that I provided maybe too many caveats. Um,
No, I thought it was great. While the microphone was working, it was great.
it's-
I'm sorry. Sorry to everyone who was working the microphones because that must have been very frustrating.
yeah, it was
But yeah,
another weird
they,
day.
they were sometimes they worked. It was good.
Sometimes they work.
But yeah, yeah. But we could hear that distantly that you were putting a lot of caveats on things.
Yeah, and so, but I think, again, I think that's partially because there's so many wrong, not full thoughts on what submission actually is. But I think you just, even now on Tuesday night, gave me the language for what I was thinking about Sunday. Is just that idea of, I think there's a fear of, like, we lose ourselves in submitting to another person. That's the assumed fear, but really, that's not the case at all. We keep ourselves, and we use who we are to honor others, and that's submission.
Yeah, it's kind of crucial because otherwise, what are they getting? Nobody wants the
Huh.
clone of themselves. That's weird,
Huh.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's more interesting to have the person who has this other skill set, this other personality type, this other perspective, who is they're cheering you on too, right?
Yeah.
and we should all cheer each other on. Everybody does amazing things all the time, but it's it's hard to remember um, every day that everybody's going through something that they're not enjoying, right?
Mm.
Could be a trip to the dentist. It could be from the dentist perspective, that guy who won't stop whining, right? It's like either one. Everybody's going through something. The dentist is like, this is going to be the longest day ever. This guy just won't stop twitching. And meanwhile, the other guy's like, this trip to the
This is
dentist is
the
killing me.
longest day ever.
The worst. Right. So, everybody's going through something and everyone's trying to do their best, well, you'd hope. Uh, but yeah, you can't give up on who you are.
Yeah.
Um, who you are is crucial to that.
Mm.
It's, but honoring the other person who has this other facet of God's love shining through their life.
Yeah.
That's what you're there to do. And to have imagine instead of a room full of people who we all, as Tom pointed, I think it was Tim pointed out, everybody in the same seats all the time. You can tell who's missing because there's a gap, in one particular row at any point. Those are not his exact words, but along that sentiment, which is true. Nobody's moving around
Mm.
to interact as much, and that's interesting. Which is, I think, great when we have the meet and greet times.
Mm.
Um, it's important, I think, to recognize all these different. There's a lot going on in the
Yeah.
congregation, any given group, right?
And it changes
And
every week.
it
It's a lot.
changes.
There's a lot going on, and people's lives change like on a dime. And yeah, and it's in to me what I like. I've really grown to appreciate this about the church. I mean, in our church, just being a microcosm of that, is like where else, you'll find pockets of it where you have a good relationship group with a group of people where you are sharing life like that. But like where else in the world are you part of a community that's commanded to care and support each other, that when life changes, because we're submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, we can use who we are to lift up other people who might really need it, if as we know about it. So to me, that's just a real gift of the church, is that and of course we don't get it right. We're not perfect at it. The church has not historically always gotten it right or been great at it. But it doesn't change the fact that we're still commanded to live a submission to one another out of reverence for Christ, and that
Yeah, thank goodness the founding documents haven't changed. At the very least,
yeah, because it was by our
the
actions.
original command is still there,
Still there.
despite of the goofy history, which is tainted.
Yeah, a
But
little bit, yeah.
human beings, we do dumb things
Yes.
on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on
But
my 17th dumb thing today.
wait a minute.
No, I didn't. Wait, I like the slow. I was just making a general comment. You're like, wait a minute. That was fantastic. Not this. Not that.
Well, so that brings up the ready. Wives, submit to your husbands.
Oh boy.
That
And
one
that's all
line.
the time
Yeah.
we have for tonight.
Yeah, that was great, everybody. Thank you very much.
That was, yeah, I mean, that was honestly, that was to me, that and then the bond servants and masters
Yeah.
obviously were the two, and I'm not stuck with, but like I'm like, like I don't want to skip over any of it. And again, not that it's there's things that aren't valuable to say about them, but it to me, and this is just my way, as ridiculous as it can be. To me, it's like I want to take time and really unpack, like, here's what's being said, here's what they mean, here's what we're assuming that's wrong, here's how, and that just takes a lot of time that I couldn't take what.
You did a nice job with that, actually, I have to say, because that
Oh, really?
is a super awkward piece in our culture,
Yes. Yeah.
in particular Western culture, but then in particular our culture, right?
Yeah.
In the corner of the U.S. I think it's it's an awkward statement because people kind of get up in arms and this goes back to submission, not out of love and humility.
Right.
It goes back to submission. I'm awesome, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you back off, man? So yeah, it's hard because we are a people generally who are fiercely independent, which is great in its own way. And then there has to be some sort of order. Is it a patriarchal order? Does it need to be that, or does I mean, right? The the next statement is, "Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church."
Right.
Christ died and was beaten severely and bled to death, just about. Couldn't carry the cross another inch, right? Horrible, horrible ending
Sacrificial love. Yeah. It's
with that love.
right. That's exactly right.
So right, so fellas, that's the love.
Yeah.
And right, that's the love that you're going to lay down out in front of the wife who says, "Okay, um, what do you want to do? Where do you want to eat? I don't know." Right. So no, it's a really complex, culturally and currently complex piece,
Yeah.
but looked at through the lens of what does that submission really mean.
Right.
It does not mean I put on blinders and a bonnet and um, I right. It's not that. I mean, if you're listening and you wear bonnets, I apologize, or blinders. I'm not sure why you would do that, but in
Case
any case,
discrimination.
yeah, if our other listener happens to do that, more power to you. But in any case, it's more about not not arguing over everything,
Right.
for one, right? Which is, my will is greater than your will, right?
Mm.
It's coming to terms with, what is it you want to do? Okay, but and then let's talk this out. You're both considering each other's
Mm.
feelings,
Yeah.
and you're doing things for the greater good of the relationship,
Yeah.
right? Jesus died to save us while we were yet sinners, right? That's
Yeah.
the line. And I mean, we're still fumbling, right? Every day, many times. But it's that forgiveness is still there
Mm.
and permanently etched, right?
Mm.
So that reminder that we need to be like that. Oh, whew, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's really heavy. So wives, submit to your husband's part. That's that's also pretty heavy, but it doesn't mean give up who you are
Right.
or have no opinions or have no input. That's not that. It's
Well,
just, yeah, there's this mutual support.
well, I think that's even what, like, some of the stuff you said before, just it's not like, to do that is not to give up of yourself. Well, it's not to give up of who you are. It is to give up of yourself, just like loving sacrificially is to give up of yourself.
Right.
But it's not to lose yourself in the other person.
Oh, yeah, that can't happen. That's
It's
a
to give
disaster
of
when that happens.
it's to give of yourself in a way that honors the other person, and that happens. That's like the wife submits to your husbands gets so misused. Not It gets misused in trying to prove a point, but it gets misused in trying to prove the negative of the point, like trying to say
Oh, yeah.
this is what's misogynistic about the Bible, and this is what's um or this just proves my ability as a husband to assert my will. like it just gets misused so much.
Every direction.
And yeah, you're right, in any direction. Um, but like it's and part of it is because it's like this weird standalone sentence, wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord, but it doesn't even though you could pull it out of context and it stands alone, it actually doesn't work outside of context because it comes like actually like and I mentioned this on Sunday, but one of the things I didn't know that I learned was in the original language it says in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, submitting one another out of reverence for Christ. And then in the original language it says, "Wives to your own husbands." It doesn't actually use the word submit because it's inferring from the previous mutual submission. So Paul's
Right.
saying, if you want to know how to mutually submit to one another, like that's equal, wives to your own husbands, husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church. So it's just this explanation for again this mutual life where we're constantly considering the other person and as in a marriage that's pretty helpful.
And the great thing when you step back again, right? The the reason you are husband and wife is because you love each other.
Right. Yeah.
In the first place, you should be having no problem being respectful to the other person and being kind and loving and supporting and lifting up that other person
That's
because
the
you love them.
that's the hope is
That's
like, yeah.
if you're using this piece to whack the other person over the head, you need to examine your relationship. There's a
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's even why I didn't want to give an inch on that. Just say like, if it's this out of fear, it's like I just
Yeah.
because when it like and it's I use that whole fire example. Like when it works, it's wonderful. But like it gets so bent out of shape that it can easily, what's a normal campfire can turn into a forest fire. But when it's campfire, man, it's great because it's
Like
just
say it's a controlled burn in New Mexico, for example.
right.
Oops.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It goes either side and it becomes this raging inferno.
Yeah.
So, and I think one thing I'll say, and then we'll not, and again, I think on the issue of submission, like there's just so much to say, and it makes for a really good conversation. But one way I'll bring this to a close for time's sake is the thing that someone mentioned to me on Sunday. They said I wonder if the word you're looking for is revolutionary, talking about how Paul brought out the family, the oikos, the family of and talked about wives, talked about bondservants, talked about kids, that normally they would never do that. Um, and so the fact that he does it all is actually really quite revolutionary for first century Israel. And so you fast forward, you think of the timelessness of scripture, and you fast
Well,
forward.
first century church was bigger than just Israel at that point.
That's true, first century church. Yeah, good point.
I mean, this is Ephesians, like
That's true.
Ephesus.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. It's even beyond, yeah, way beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's, missing Israel's that way. Um, but just that idea that this is really a revolutionary statement about what mutual submission looks like, and that and to practice it means lifting up everybody else that the culture has ignored, or just like kids, why the ones that didn't have power
Mm.
get a voice and get lifted up. So it's like
So
mutual submission brings
yeah, there's
honor.
a it raises the rank, right?
Right.
And then the one who's the head, the pater familias, right,
Mm,
then has to consider themselves to have lowered themselves to the point of, and that's
yeah.
it's amazing. It's an amazing loop, how that's built. Yeah.
And we've assumed the opposite, that it's still like, well, this is just what the culture, assumes it's just this misogynistic text that the husband has the wife submit. I'm like, no, it's actually the reverse. The husband lowers himself, which you would never do in the first century the first century culture of the church. Um, and anyone who culturally has not had a voice, wives, uh, bondservants, kids, all of a sudden do. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. It just kind of undoes and honors, everybody gets a voice in mutual submission. So it's a really cool revolutionary passage. It just takes a lot of just takes a lot of unpacking.
Because of how we understand the world,
Yeah.
because of who we are. Yeah. It's an amazing little bit. So imagine it was only a few verses.
Yeah. Well, that's what. Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, it's. I mean, it's this little passage that we could probably do a episode 4, part 2, if we wanted to.
Right? It's pretty amazing
Yeah,
to have jammed that much in there.
it is. But on that note,
about how the culture. Yeah.
what's that?
Nope. On that note,
I was gonna say on that note.
I submit to the end.
On that note, Jem, I was going to close with we'll jam a little bit in there. That'll be the end of our podcast motto for episode 4. As we
Well, okay.
As I was trying to segue to the end of this, but it didn't work quite like I thought it would.
Well, how do you want to end it?
That's how I wanted to end it, with jam a little bit in there. With you'd say, it's trying to like segue out, but
I'm sorry, I'm messing with you with
that statement. That statement didn't segue out like I had hoped. So on that note, we'll get to episode 5 in another 6 months. So maybe listen to this a few times.
Stay tuned.
Stay. Can you feel the tension? It's palpable.
Just sit by your phone and wait.